What's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte. And first off, I look great in this jersey, right? We all just admire how that glow on the jersey looks incredible. But okay, so, all right, let's get that out of the way. The Bruins. We're talking about the Bruins today, of course, and there's been some rumors around this organization that, there could be a shakeup to this team, and some of them have led to free agency options, guys on the trade market. The Boston Bruins could be quite active this summer. Again, I already made a video. If you haven't checked that out, make sure to check it out. Basically talking about the potential future with or without Patrice Bergeron and how that could affect the team, right? Is David Pastrnak, who's a year from unrestricted free agency. They seem to be wanting to keep him on a max term, long-term contract, but there's also, again, could there be a trade there? But we're also going over today some other guys that have been the rumor mill, guys on defense to help their blue line, as well as guys up front, which I'm sure my Bruins fans have heard those names, so we're going to go over those today. So looking at the Bruins lineup, what is the biggest critique for this Bruins team this year, right? Throughout most of the season, the sentiment, it wasn't really goaltending. Their goaltending, obviously with the big hugs between Ullmark and Swayman this year, was a very popular thing on social media. And it was a nice little shtick that they had, Ullmark and Swayman. So the goaltending wasn't the problem. Their defense, they did end Hampus Lindholm at the deadline. That obviously helped things. Okay, so it's not that. Well, what else could be the issue? And I think when you look at this roster right off the bat, it's pretty glaring that they lack a second-line center. And that's with Patrice Bergeron. Things get even more complicated if Bergeron leaves, because now, not only do you need to fill a second-line role, you also need a first-line center for this hockey club. And that's where I get a little bit concerned here for the Bruins, because they're lacking that depth down the middle. Now, to be fair, their bottom six centers are good. Thomas Nosek, Eric Howla, and Charlie Coyle. All great third and fourth line centers. But they don't go in the top six. And Eric Howla is considered, on game 6 against Carolina, he was playing second line center with Hall and Pastrnak. And that's not good enough. That's just not going to work, especially when you look at, even a team they played in the first round in Carolina, who had Jordan Staal as their third line center. You're not going to win that way. You're not going to win that way, and you need some more center depth. So with that said, well, who's out there? Well, internally, they have guys like Trent Frederick, who they're hoping could jump into that spot at some point. But again, there's no guarantees with that. And then after that, it kind of gets a little stale. So with that said, and especially again, you're looking at a window where they want to win now, you do need to add somebody there. Now, the big name that everybody's been talking about has been Philip Forsberg of the Nashville Predators. I do like him as a player, of course. He's going to add some scoring depth to this team. But truthfully, where is he going to play? Now, here's the thing. So they've got Marchand, Bergeron, and DeBrusk as their first line group, right? So let's say they did trade Jake DeBrusk, which has been rumored for, a year and a half now since he requested a trade last year. And even before that, there was rumors he could get traded. So let's say Jake DeBrusk moves out. Now there's your spot. Because on the second line, you have Hall, Howla, and Pasta. And I don't see Hall or Pastrnak going outside the top six. That's not going to happen. So DeBrusk would have to go in a trade, and they could bring in Philip Forsberg to play the wing. Perfect. That works. Now, this is the more recent report we've been hearing for the Bruins. Kevin Paul DuPont, a senior writer for the Boston Bruins Globe, the Boston Sports Globe, lists Nazem Kadri as a potential option for the Boston Bruins if Patrice Bergeron plans to retire. And that's obviously the big hindrance, because if Bergeron retires, that's about, $10 million in cap space. You could get the Nazem Kadri for around that same price tag. Now think about how nasty the Bruins would be next season with Brad Marchand and Nazem Kadri playing on the same line, on the same team. I don't want anything to do with that come playoff time. But that is a very interesting verdict, especially with the success of Nazem Kadri this season. That would definitely lessen the blow for the Bruins if they were to lose Bergeron. But again, even with that said, I think I would be satisfied if it was Bergeron and Kadri as your 1-2 punch. But you lose Bergeron, you're replacing Kadri with Bergeron, you're still with the same issue you had before, which is that lack of a second line center. So, I don't know. I think, and then again, if you trade DeBrusk, now that's another guy who goes into the top 6, right? Ideally, it's Forsberg, but do you have the money to sign both Forsberg and Nazem Kadri this summer? You're asking for a lot there, and you're expecting a lot for both of them to sign with your organization. Again, not impossible, but you're asking for a lot there, and that would mean that a guy like Craig Smith, Nick Foligno, or Trent Frederick would move into the top 6 again, which again, I think the Bruins would like to avoid. So again, it's one of those things that the Bruins are, if they were to sign Kadri, you probably would see Jake DeBrusk stay, and they wouldn't even explore the opportunity of going for a top 6 winger in free agency or trade. They just don't have the cap space to do that. And DeBrusk is on a fairly good contract, especially with the way he ended this season. I don't think they really want to get rid of him, but it's more on DeBrusk. He wants to get traded. So from that perspective, I think the Bruins going after Kadri definitely makes sense, but it's definitely something to, again, there's going to be, the Bruins will not be the only team that's going to be linked and interested in Nazem Kadri. It's going to cost a lot of money. So it comes down to, does Kadri want the money, which he's obviously made a lot of so far in his career? Is he going for the bag, or is he going to compete and go to a winning team? Because he's been on the Avalanche the last 2 seasons since he got traded from the Maple Leafs. So, to believe that he would end up going to a bad team, like say Jersey or Philadelphia, and take the bag, he can do. But again, if he wants to potentially win and compete, he might get a little bit more closer to the medium between both of those with, say, Boston, where he could get the money, but he also has the chance to compete with a good hockey team. So that's the latest up front. Again, Forsberg and Kadri. Of course, the Bruins are being linked to the big boy names, but of those franchises around the league, I do see the Bruins an original 6 franchise with a pretty good track record, going to the final in 19, winning a cup in 2011. They do have some recent success for you to say, yeah, they do have some success there, and that is somewhere I'd like to go. With that said, we also take a look at another guy that's been linked to the Boston Bruins here over the past 2 weeks, and we're going to the blue line. The Bruins could look to reinvent their blue line. You have obviously Hampus Lindholm and Charlie McAvoy as your top pair. I don't see them touching that. I do like Brandon Carlo. I think he's a good fit there. But then Mike Riley is your left side defenseman on the second pair alongside Carlo. And I don't think that's the best fit. I do see them going after a guy like Alec Martinez, which according to NHL trade rumors, according to Kevin Paul DuPont, again from the Boston Sports Globe or whatever it is, the Bruins could target Vegas Golden Knights defenseman Alec Martinez this offseason. He would be a really nice fit alongside Carlo on that second pair. Kind of what they were hoping Derek Forbort should have been when they signed him last year. I took a lot of heat for when they signed, Forbort to that money last year, but it isn't looking great. To be honest, again, it's only $3 million, but he's a third pairing defenseman for $3 million. It's really not the best. Zaboral fits that role just fine. Connor Clifton fits that role just fine, and they're getting paid a hell of a lot less. So that's where things, it's like they maybe, goofed it up a little bit in that sense. But I do think Alec Martinez would be a really nice addition there. Again, they don't lack in left shot defensemen. They do have Grzelcyk. They do have Lindholm, who is their first pairing guy. But again, ideally, in a perfect world, Grzelcyk goes on your third pair as your left shot defenseman, and then Alec Martinez is depth there as your second guy, so he moves some guys down the chart. Now, the only problem with Alec Martinez, so here's the good news. Alec Martinez would be cheaper in terms of trade value. So the Bruins could trade for a second pairing left shot defenseman along with Carlo, probably for a third round pick. As long as the Bruins are willing to give up a third round pick, they get a top 4 pairing defenseman, but they do have to take this year and next year's cap hit on Alec Martinez. What's that salary, you may ask? It is $5.25 million, which is a little bit steep. And he is 34 years old, so he's on the wrong side of 30 going into the fall, and he's getting paid over $5 million until 2024. So there is a little bit of risk involved in there. And I do think, unfortunately, that Forbort signing does negate them from really, truly getting a guy like Martinez. And again, he also has a modified no-trade clause, which also you have to account for. Unless he really hates Boston, I do think he would be willing to go there. He is from Rochester Hills, Michigan, so he would be a little bit closer to home. So it's not necessarily the biggest stretch to say he would go there. He has a 16 team no trade list, but it becomes only a 8-team no trade list by the end of that contract. But for this season, for 2022-23, it is a 12-team no trade list. So he puts a list for 12 teams he does not want to go to. So it will be easier for Vegas to move him than it was, say, last year, where there was another 4 teams on that list. And obviously next year it goes down to 8. So it gradually goes down from that 16 where it was in the first year of the deal. In terms of total salary, this is a deal where there's actually signing bonuses. So if Boston were to make this trade, they'd probably make it after free agency, because they do have to give that $1.5 million signing bonus. Ideally, if you're the Bruins, you would probably wait till after. You could get some value in terms of saying, hey, listen, Vegas, if we're going to take this contract, we'll take him. We'll take the signing bonus of $1.5 million on the draft floor, but it's going to cost, you're only getting a 4th round pick for Alec Martinez. You could kind of leverage that in a sense. So the Bruins have a lot to work with here. It doesn't look like it necessarily. They don't have a ton of cap space, but again, if you move on from Jake DeBrusk, if you start to put Trent Frederick in the top 6, you rely more on young guys like Jack Studnicka to come into the top 6 next year. You're relying more on the entry-level contracts. The Bruins would have some more flexibility, and I do believe that guys like Martinez and Nazem Kadri could be had and on the board. The question is, what's the price going to cost? Because again, for Martinez, if it's a 3rd or 4th round pick and you're taking on that salary, I do that. I think that's a pretty good trade. Or it might cost you more, say a 2nd round pick to get him from Vegas, but maybe they retain, say, 10% of that contract, and now that helps you out a little bit in order to keep guys and bring guys in, some depth contracts. That's another $1 million that you could keep, say, for free agency or even into next season. Say there's a couple injuries and stuff like that, you could bring someone in a cheap contract in a trade. So let me know what you guys think down below. What do you think of the Boston Bruins potentially going after defenseman Alec Martinez from the Vegas Golden Knights, or obviously the forwards that everyone's been hyping up that are a little bit more of the sexy names than Martinez, Nashville Predators forward Philip Forsberg, as well as Nazem Kadri of the Colorado Avalanche, who is definitely dazzling people with his success so far. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.